All right, good afternoon. We are live here at Moneyline MMA. Coming back to you guys following up an interesting fight night card. Some success, some losses were had. Overall, I was pretty successful. Jose didn't lock in his usual five weight success that we've seen so far this year, so Jose will have to bounce back. But at least for me, my five weight Bruno Ferreira was able to get the job done. Spinning back elbow KO against Dustin Stoltzfus in the first round. Let's go. Bruno Ferreira's my boy. And my four weight, Raul Rosas Jr., gets the submission against Tercios. The fight goes into the second round, even though there's like few strikes landed. It was a pretty heavy wrestling affair. Rosas going for seven takedown attempts, getting four of them. Tercios was like a little slimy, little difficult to hold down, but Rosas, and there was even a point where it looked Rosas was gonna lose. I tell you what, Tercios had Rosas's, like, he was in a rear naked choke, and he was over Rosas's big old chin, and I was sitting there thinking, like, dang, like that must make it really nice to have a face as big as Raul Rosas. That's like the one thing people always make fun of him for. Well, guess what? It prevented him from getting choked out, and he was able to get out of the bad position and choke out Ricky Tercios for the win. So what a good fight from him there. The main loss, I would say, from Jose and I last Saturday was Charlie Radke. Definitely an unfortunate ending there, as he gets kneed, and specifically knee to the liver. It's a tough spot to be able to recover from that. I thought Radke was doing really well. Landed more strikes at that point. He had more significant strikes, at least percentage wise, landed. So Charlie Radke was doing what I think he needed to do. He had two missed takedowns, but I think he was setting up his game at that point. But ended up taking a knee to the liver, couldn't continue. That's a first round KO against. Definitely good for Perez. He got a performance bonus that night. It's tough, man. I think if that fight gets redone a few times, we see Radke win the next couple of times. I still think he's the better fighter, and I'm excited. I'm sure Jose is too, to see him come back to the octagon. Outside of that, Jared Cannonier, we both picked him, but he was lower weights, and for a good reason. He didn't get the job done. Very, very controversial call. I mean, yeah, he was taking hits, but to end the fight in a main event 5 rounds that early, like, Cannonier needs to be sleeping or on the mat if you're going to end that fight. He was still running around, and it was clear he was in danger, but there was no, like, there's a difference between being in danger and closing it out. There have been multiple instances that any of us could recall in which a fighter was in danger and they figured it out. All right, so this is just crazy to end that fight early, but I'm just going to leave it at that. Still not upset because Cannonier was losing, no doubt about it. It just doesn't seem like a fair ending to that fight whatsoever. So good on Jose also. Going on the co-main, I did not make a pick on the co-main, and for a great reason, because Jose gets the accuracy there with Dominic Reyes as his one weight, gets the first round KO, and he looked pretty good. I think Jacoby had a couple spots where he looked okay, but just didn't find his rhythm. Obviously, a lot of first round finishes in that main event, so this was the third of those, and yeah, he looked good, but I still can't say that watching that I'm like, oh, Reyes is back. Reyes is going to be the next champion. Reyes, in my opinion, still gets so quickly cleaned up by Alex Pereira. It wouldn't even be fun to watch. You would be sad. You would be like, oh no, more brain damage for the poor man. So let's just hope that let's hope that his next opponent doesn't give him permanent brain damage. I'll just leave that at that. So, any final notes from you on the last Saturday fight card, Jose? Yeah. So yes, speaking of that, I'll quit dawdling around in the past because we got some fights to talk about this Saturday. Admittedly, not the most insane card, headlined by Alex Perez fighting Tatsuro Taira, the prospect coming out of Japan. That's a flyweight bout. Main event's going to be starting a little earlier in the day, at least before 9 p.m. Central Time, that is. Prelims are starting at 3 p.m. So you're going to see a 5 or 6 o'clock main card coming up Saturday. These fights are at the UFC Apex. Thankfully, I think I heard that they're quitting the UFC Apex cards at some point, but we're going to see a couple of more UFC. We're going to see them at least going into August. I don't know if that's true that they're stopping because at least according to Tapology, they have UFC Apex bouts scheduled at least into August. So we're going to still be seeing more and more UFC Apex bouts. Just don't like it because there's, first of all, no fans. It just seems it's so quiet and unentertaining. And then also, the smaller cage, I think, makes a big difference in a lot of fights. You also kind of have to think about it just a slight different, because the cage size, Jose and I were discussing it a little bit. Of course, it's dependent on each fighter. Some strikers and wrestlers are all different, but in general, the cage is closer. So those who want to wrestle have a harder time taking down their opponents. And I just feel like with that smaller space, it's a little bit more confined, and you have to kind of box it out in a lot of cases, or you have to be at least good enough to get to the fence, and that really gives you some leverage against being taken down. But that's not to say that some of the Dagestan style wrestlers won't have success, and we're going to have a few words to say about guys like that, as there are multiple of them on this card. And speaking of that, going to my 5 weight of the afternoon, and just as a quick reminder for any of those who are new to our weight system, Jose and I pick 5 of the fights on the 13 fight card coming up Saturday, and we weigh them in order of confidence, with 5 being the most confident pick. So my 5 weight is essentially me saying, this is the guy I'm most confident in winning. This is my lock of Saturday afternoon. And then 4 weight would be my second most confident, all the way down to 1 weight being my 5th confident. But I still think they're obviously going to win because I chose them out of the 13 options. So that being said, we start here with our 5 weights, and we move down from there to not beat around the bush and to get our most confident picks out of the way first. And mine for Saturday afternoon will not surprise anybody who's already looked at this card. And it's going to be a Sue Almabayev in a flyweight bout against Jose Johnson. This is a little bit of a fade against Jose Johnson, and also just a Sue being one of those prospects that you don't want to mess with. He's got the name, the EV ending, right? And that goes along with being the style of fighter that wrestles and usually has some kind of boxing skills, but you really rely on your submission game, and that's exactly what Asu fits in that box here. He's got 9 submission wins in his professional career, 3 KO wins, and 7 decision wins. So KOs are his least, even less. He gets less KO wins than decision wins. And I really, as I mentioned, a fade against Jose Johnson, who started his MMA career really embarrassingly. To be quite honest, he was like 1-7 or something in his first 7 fights. And granted, that was at the amateur level, but he's come a long way. He's a very seasoned veteran, no doubt about it. But in any case, Asu Almabayev is going to pretty much roll through him. He being Jose Johnson has been submitted time and time again, to be honest. It's been 4 times now in his professional career, but it really kind of feels like anytime someone with some jiu-jitsu ability wants to take him down and submit him, it works out in their favor. So this is a very easy pick for me at Asu Almabayev 5-weight, and the odds reflect that too before I pass it over to Jose. I mean, we're talking minus 530 odds on Asu Almabayev. So to be honest, I'll mention it later in the show, but my main pick is actually going to be to parlay a couple of these guys together, because your other option is to do Almabayev, say, submission, and you'll get at least probably minus 200 or minus 150. That would be another really good one, but you're going to want to find a way to shorten the odds on this bet. You could even just to be really safe, you could say Amabaya by double chance submission or points, so that you cover, the decision win as well. I think, of course, a KO could happen, but I think it's a lot more likely that you see. But that double chance bet of submission and points will still probably be 350, 400. So it's one of those spots that's going to be hard to catch your value. But at least it's a confident pick. Like I said, lock of the week. I've been really hot on my 5-weight picks, and that will continue easily, because even the last, I might as well mention here, I keep babbling on, but as I think of things, it's like, dang, that's right. Because I have called the winning method. Not only have I said who's going to win, but I've called the winning method for my 5-weight for weeks now. And even last week, I specifically called Bruno Ferreira by KO. And guess what? It was a first-round KO. So, boom. I'll continue to call it. Not only am I calling Amabaya, but it will be by submission. Jose, what do you think? Okay, sounds good. So yeah, and I think that's a great point, that you called out with the size difference, and that Jose Johnson, like, yeah, it's true, man. To be 6 foot tall and to fight at 125, and while you were saying that, I was like, dang, like, that's true, man. 125 is small. And I looked in his last multiple of his last bouts in the UFC, at least. I can't speak on his entire career, but at least I can speak on at least the last 5 fights in his professional career, and he was fighting at least bantamweight or featherweight. He did not ever fight at flyweight before, so this will be his first time going down to 125. Yeeks! I'd watch out for the weight cut. That's an interesting spot. If you can get your money in now before that weight cut, I mean, wow. I could almost guarantee, man. I can almost guarantee come Friday when they weigh in, there's going to be a decent amount more money going on Asu, because people are going to either Jose Johnson's going to be overweight and he's going to look like crap, and they're going to have to tell him he can't fight, and they cancel it and you get your money back, or Jose just looks like literal bones. Like, I don't know how you're. That's crazy. I'll just leave it at that. Yeah. Yes, sir. And to be honest, thinking about how Mabaya fights, like I'm with Jose. I haven't seen every single one of his professional fights, but just having been able to see what he's done in the UFC, I think he the style of fighting he has is that Jose Johnson is going to fall right into it because Jose Johnson doesn't necessarily utilize his size that well. I mean, he's been even at 6 foot tall, he's a big dude at 135. Big dude. And he still struggles to avoid getting taken down and to avoid getting finished even. He's been finished by not getting knocked out. And I really just feel like that kind of proves that he doesn't even use that range very well. So few other things to say. On top of that, I know Jose doesn't even have a weight, so it's Jose doesn't have any marbles in the race here. But he is my 5 weight. He being Asu Amobayev. Asu specifically inside the distance. Compare on your book when the odds come out on Tuesday or Wednesday between inside the distance and by submission, because if you can get good, like a decent amount better odds on by submission, do it. I think the chance of a KO is pretty low. It's possible, but Almabayev has triple the amount of submission wins than he does KO wins. And I don't think Jose Johnson is some kind of person that's going to really be able to defend much. I mean, think about if Almabayev gets Jose Johnson's calf or something. Like, Jose doesn't have enough strength to be able to pull and get away, I don't think. I mean, especially in a small cage, there's just no way. I think this actually might counteract what I said at the beginning with the small cage being counteractive for the wrestler, because at this point I feel like Jose's almost just like he's like a daddy long leg, maybe. So it'll be interesting. Maybe it will pose the difference because it's hard to change his center of gravity being that tall. So I don't know. That'll be very interesting to see how that works when they get to the fence in clinch situations. But very, very confident Asu Almabayev wins those, gets the dub, and continues my 5 weight success. So that being said, let's move on to Jose's 5 weight. Well, my thoughts is that how did he get into the UFC? Well, he's Mackenzie Dern's boyfriend. Apparently. Well, I mean, that's accurate, but apparently that's all you need to be a UFC fighter. Is just the boyfriend of a attractive UFC women's MMA fighter. That's all. Boom, boom. But yeah, that being said, I totally agree, man. Aliskarov is my full weight. It's not even close. Very confident, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying with my 5 weight. I really think one of the directions to take here is a 3-way parlay between Asuo Mobayev, Ikram Aliskarov, and one further fighter that we'll discuss later in this show, because those are going to all together give way better returns, and I'm telling you, it's going to be one of the more guaranteed parlays that's kind of ever existed, at least this year in the UFC. It's pretty wild. Um, it's one of those spots where I agree with, like, what has Tricoli done to really deserve any feeling like he can do it? I guess like he's got a good record, right? He's 12-3. He's got finishes, 8 finishes to be exact of his 12 wins. So that's pretty good, and he's on a streak. But the streak doesn't consider any of the UFC fights. He really he won against Kenneth Berg. It's now showing as a no contest, but he won his contender series fight. And honestly, I'm not sure if it got overturned because of drugs or because of steroids. I'm not quite sure, but in any case, that would also happen almost July 9th. So it'll be 4 years, 11 months ago as of the fight night. That's just crazy. Like, nothing more needs to be said about that. And you asked at the beginning too about the odds, and I did find it was weird. Like, a lot of the books don't even have this up as an available bet, and it looks mainly just because I'm assuming because it's first of all a replacement fight. Ikram was supposed to fight Andre Muniz, and I don't know exactly when they got Tricoli to fill in the blank there, but it might have been just like too recently for the books to feel comfortable putting it out yet. So keep an eye out for your local book if it's not up now, for it to be up later in the week. But the thing is, man, it's going to be at crazy odds. The lowest I found Aliskarov at was -800. I found him all the way up to -1400, depending on what bet. Like, bet 365 was one of them. And then he was at -1000, I believe. Like, the average is about -1000. So Ikram's you're gonna have to bet $1,000 on Ikram to win 100. I mean, that to me is not worth it. You bet him inside the distance, and you're probably still looking at betting 600 to win 100. And that's just so. It's not a spot where I see really any value betting straight up on it, unless you're able to get it at an insane number at a book, like early on. Maybe a book puts it out at like -500 for whatever reason, and you get that number. That'd be pretty crazy, but I doubt it. Any book doing it now, releasing things this late in the week, even it only being Monday, they're going to be pretty accurate to start because they know what their competitors are doing. So to quit rambling on about it, what you said is very accurate. Ikram, 4-weight, very confident. Parlay it up inside the distance. It's going to be easy almost. I do want to mention too, because I feel like anybody listening will be like, "Oh, how could you miss the size part of it?" We just talked about size for however many minutes with Almabayev and Jose Johnson, because Tricoli has the clear size advantage here: 6'5", 82-inch reach versus 6', 76-inch reach. But this is another interesting situation in which Tricoli has fought a lot at light heavyweight. He's fought at catch weight, 200 pounds. He's fought at all kinds of different weight classes, 200 plus though. And this is a middleweight bout specifically. So he has to get down to 185. Keep an eye out for how he looks on the scale, if he's able to make weight. Because I'll tell you what, man, if he doesn't make weight, but the fight continues, I don't like. I'm worried, man. Fighters that don't make weight and still fight are like 60% win because they have all the extra energy from not doing that extra step to get that weight down. The last couple of pounds are always the hardest, you know. They can rehydrate right away instead of needing to get on the scale. Like Tricoli with that size and that kind of hydration over Ikram, I no longer like the bet because of how steep it is. But that's kind of a big if, and I think you would be more likely to see a Stephen Thompson situation where he's just like, I won't fight. I know you're going to be too good, but I don't know because at the same time, like, what has Tricoli done to deserve respect? Like, he hasn't beaten anybody in the UFC, so not quite sure Ikram's worried. However much weight the dude even has, so just wanted to make that comment though because that is a somewhat significant size difference. Assuming they both make weight normally as they're contracted to, I like Ikram a lot, even considering he'll be a little smaller. He's huge. Hmm. Yes, sir. That is your four. Sorry, your five weight, my four weight. I was looking at the reverse, so that's 9 total points. That's the second highest you can possibly get, and that'll definitely be a moneyline MAS lock of the week. Let's move down to then my three weight. Jose gave his five, my five, and my four. So let's discuss then my three weight next. And to be honest, we were briefly discussing before the show because we pick our weights in picks completely separately, and then right before the show we just tell each other what they are so that we know the order that we're gonna go in. And so that being said, we know the order, but we know the order we're going in. But the UFC, on the other hand, can struggle quite often to get a reliable list of what fighter is fighting when. You'll get the main event, the co-main event, and the rest will be some random order that Tapology, UFC Stats, the UFC website, and Google none can agree with. It's all scrambled and out of order. So I have no idea when this fight is going to happen, to be quite honest. You just got to turn the fights on the day of, and it'll probably have the list then for you pretty accurately on the day of. But until then, just be ready to watch it at any moment because we've got Nate Maness fighting Jimmy Flick, and I don't think it's going to go for very long. I've got Nate Maness knocking out Jimmy Flick. I'm going to call yet another finish here. This is a spot where I'm going for Nate Maness and against Jimmy Flick. We're speaking about a man in the last handicap is what I'm looking for. In Tricoli, it's like, what does he deserve to respect? What has he done to deserve respect in the UFC? And I say the same exact freaking thing about Jimmy Flick. He hasn't beaten anybody that good, and I think he's going to continue to lose. At least I get he's coming off a win against Melvin Gordon. Not impressed. Lands 3 strikes and gets a submission win in the second round. That's not going to happen against our buddy Nate Maness. He'll have the dude knocked out before the dude can even think about getting him in an advantageous situation on the ground. Nate Maness has only been submitted once in his UFC career by Tagir Ulanbekov, of all people. All right, well, guess what? Tagir is way superior, in my opinion, to the grappling game than Jimmy Flick. Way superior. It's not even close. Nate Maness will not be finished on the ground by Jimmy Flick and absolutely has the striking advantage. It is hilarious how bad Jimmy Flick lands 1.7 strikes per 5 minutes. Or per minute, sorry. Sorry, 1.7 per minute. So could you stand here with me for 60 seconds? That's what he did. Yeah, at least in terms, like, of course that's not actually what he did, right? I'm playing around, but that's what would have equated to damage, something that landed. Everything else that he did missed. Was an air ball, was a dodge, was a block, right? Nothing else that actually led to him winning the fight. That's crazy, dude. It's hilarious how much better Nate Maness is than anybody this dude, maybe Alessandro Costa, but he lost anyways. Like, it's hilarious. Nate Maness would beat everybody that Jimmy Flick has fought Dude, I don't even know what more needs to be said there. Nate Maness, third round KO. What do you think, Jose? Third. I said third round. I didn't mean to specify round. I just meant to say inside the distance KO. Sweet. So that's staying near an alternate money line lock there with 7 total confidence points between Maness, between us two on Maness. And yeah, what you said is exact match there, man. I mean, Flick needs to get the submission, but I'm very confident he won't. And honestly, I also wanted to highlight that Flick not only okay, so yeah, they both don't land that much. They don't throw crazy volume, but at least Maness is the one with KO wins under his belt, and he's coming off a first round KO win. It's not against an insane opponent, but if Flick was so good, then he should be finishing his opponents in the first round too. But instead, he's taken 37 shots by Malcolm Gordon and submitted him in the second round, landing 3 this whole time. That's not going to win. He is not going to land 3 strikes and beat Nate Maness. It's not happening. So it's to me just as simple as that. And Nate Maness also has 4.29, so almost a full strike, 0.92 less of a strikes absorbed per minute rate as well. So okay, Nate Maness puts out a little more volume and receives less at the same time. All the while, you can look at some of his opponents that he's fought. He, being Nate Maness, has fought Umar Nurmagomedov. He's one of the few of those brothers who actually strikes and actually, like, yeah, he'll wrestle you sometimes, but dang, Umar can strike too. He can box, and he gets dominated by Umar, 74-2 in strikes landed, right? So that one fight is like a crazy outlier because Umar's not even in the UFC. He's dominating people in other promotions now. But Nate Maness is still here doing his thing, and I think he's fought way better competition, and through fights like that, he still has better strikes differential than Jimmy Flick. It's not even close. Nate Maness stands on the feet and finishes him. It's been called. Yes, sir. All right. So that's my 5, 4, and 3 in order. That's your 5 and 4. We're agreeing here so far. Let's go down to your 3 weight. Man, someone pointed out to me, I didn't realize that this is like one of those fights um, that Joshua Van is the dog here. I might mention. Let me double check exactly by how much. I know for a fact he is the dog. He's plus 176. Tagir is minus 230. And this is so fascinating. On Tapology, 59% of people have voted for Van to win this fight. That's very interesting. That's the one fight on this card that I've seen where the underdog is actually projected, like the more people have voted for him to win. And they're specifically, it looks like they're voting for him to win by decision. A whole bunch of them have voted for him to win by decision. 76%. That's just really interesting. I'm with you, man. I say that to say that I'm with you on Tagir. I I was surprised. Like I do see what Joshua Van brings to the table. It's a really good striking game. It's complete. It's impressive. He hasn't been able to show it off like in full, I feel like, in the UFC. He's got a couple fights go the distance. He gets the decision wins. And then he most recently knocks out Felipe Boons. Definitely not the best competition. Like, this is an insane step up for Joshua Van. I think he's got potential. I think he could be like a Piotr Jan kind of guy going into the future, maybe. I'm not necessarily saying he could be, because Piotr Jan was a champion at one point. I don't know if Van could necessarily be a champion, but he's a great striker, man. And he brings, so that's what kind of pushed me to bring this down to my 2-weight. If I didn't already mention that Tagir is my 2-weight here. But I'm still pretty confident, and he is the final leg of that 3 OVEV parlay. So you take Asu Almabayev, you take Ikram Alaskarov, and you take Tagir, and you add them all together, and you're gonna get. But it will be hard because Ikram, as we noticed, is not even on a bunch of these books. He's not even a bettable option. So maybe later in the week you have to wait for that to pop up. But Asu Almabayev and Tagir are definitely bettable options, and them two, at least on FanDuel, pay at minus 142 alone. So if you're able to get a third leg of Ikram in there, that probably gets to even money. I would say that gets about to even money so that you can bet 100 to win 100. And that's a good parlay, man. That's a good parlay. Or you could be a little more ballsy and say, you know what, Ikram's too steep for me. Even if he's there at minus 1,000, I don't want to do it. Take my boy and Jose's boy as the moneyline MMA lock of the week and add Nate Maness in there. You get plus 106. So you win actually 106 on your $100 bet. That's good, man. Just saying. Tagir plus Almabayev plus Nate Maness is not a bad parlay. But no further delays. I'm going to move us on to my one way to the afternoon. And then Jose has one more pick for us after that, and we will be closing the show. But we wouldn't be an MMA show without at least discussing the main event at some point. It's clearly a fight that both of us have lower on our rankings because we've gone through both of our 5, 4, and 3 weights. And my 2-weight even, because my 1-weight is on the main event, but it is on the underdog Alex Perez. Jose and I were talking about it before the show. It was a really hot underdog streak to start the year. Underdogs were killing it in main events, specifically is what I'm referring to. Underdogs in main events this year were going crazy. They were winning left and right. They were above 60% even at one point. But now we've fallen in it's where averages always come back, right? Because ever since, if you go all the way back to Alex Perez's win against Matt Nicolau on April 27th of this year, that will actually be the last underdog main event win that the UFC's had this year, and that's pretty crazy. You've seen multiple, obviously Pantoja, Derek Lewis, Lerone Murphy, Islam Makhachev, and Nasruddin Imavov was a slight favorite, but he was a favorite and he won. So I'm calling it as my 1-weight that Alex Perez doubles down on being a main event underdog that wins this year, and he breaks the streak of favorites winning in main events to continue the underdog main event run that they've had in 2024. I have a lot of respect for Taira, but it comes down to the fact that I think Alex Perez is really hard to keep down. Taira has some really prominent jiu-jitsu skills with back-to-back submission finishes earlier in his career, and his most recent fights were decision and KO, so he's been able to show an ability to win in multiple, like, he can get a decision, he can get a submission, and he can get a KO. You never know almost with Taira. It's hard to bet winning method with him because he can do it all. But he is really, 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 really taking, like, I don't know how else to exaggerate it other than just say really a bunch of times. Taking a step up against Alex Perez, a former title challenger. Perez, I understand he took a lot of time off, but it was less time than I realized. It wasn't even 2 full years off. Comes back and looks good against Mokaev. I thought he looked good against Mokaev. I mean, Mokaev landed 3 of 20 takedown attempts, and it was hard to keep him down. Alex Perez ended up getting up every time. Perez should have won that fight if he throws his hands. So Perez throws his hands, and he gets a KO against Mateus Nicolau as an underdog in a main event. I love it, man, and I think I can see it happening again. If Perez defends takedowns and prevents Taira from getting on him, getting in a body lock or a body triangle or getting on his back like a backpack, I am confident to say that I actually think Perez is the better striker here and will win the striking exchanges. He'll win the power exchanges, and I would say winning method, KO or points. Jose, what do you think?
obviously I'm showing some respect to Alex Perez, so Taira is my one weight, but I feel pretty. I do. I maybe I should. I should. I'm starting to think maybe I should have moved him up to my two weight. But that being said, yeah, I'm rolling with Tyra as my one weight.
Sounds good, man. So we do agree. We do agree, and in that case, that'll be. Sorry, we do disagree. That'll be interesting, man. Tyra is a stud. I wouldn't quite write him off as being finished either. As someone who has Perez as my one weight, I would say be careful because Perez could clip Tyra, and it might not be a KO that puts Tyra like to sleep, but I could see a TKO situation. So to me, Alex Perez definitely doesn't choke out Tyra, but you never know. That puncher's chance is always there. I will say that I think Alex Perez has similar power to Tyra, no doubt about it. He's gotten a couple of TKO wins in the UFC, so who's to say he doesn't do it again? And I'm just not as confident. That's why he's my one weight.
Yeah. As you mentioned too, yeah. This I think this is a fight. Yeah, I could go almost either or. So that's yeah. I was even debating myself with Alex Perez as my one way earlier too. So uh, that being said, yeah, this is the one we'll disagree on, and I think that just brings us down to one more fight.
Yes, sir. And that will be your two weight, I believe.
Yes, sir. And this is the featherweight bout between Lucas Almeida and Timmy Kwamba. Right now, Kwamba is the betting favorite, a strong betting favorite at minus 200, while Lucas Almeida is the betting underdog at plus 154. This one, I'm going with the underdog. He is my two way, and again, that's why I kind of wish I would have moved him down as my one way. But that being said, I'm sticking with him as my two way. Not as high confidence either. He's coming off a two fight losing streak to Andre Feely and Pat Sabatini. Game finished in both. But before that, he was right. He was on a two fight losing streak, and then he did lose in the Dana White's Contender Series to Daniel Zellweger. But Daniel Zellweger, he's thus far been, he's riding a three fight winning streak, and he's been looking nothing but phenomenal in the UFC, an exciting fighter. So no shame in that in Dana White's Contender Series. But again, yeah, he's got two. He's bounced back with two wins, and now he has two losses. But I still think he's up there to keep hanging and still keep beating like these new up and comers like Timothy Kwamba, because Lucas Almeida, even though he's 33, yeah, he himself has not been in the UFC long as well since 2021, and he's only fought five times. So, but that being said, he does have more UFC vet experience, I guess, over Timothy Kwamba. And that being said, I'm looking at this almost like a Dom Reyes fight because even though I think there's just some recency biases just because Lucas Almeida got finished two times in a row. But if you look at his record before that, he was 14-1 before that, so he definitely has a lot more wins on there, and I think he shows just a better history of being a winner. Best way to put it. And out of his 14 wins, nine of them come via KO/TKO, and he does have five submissions. None of his wins have gone to decisions. So to me, that makes me think that yeah, like since I'm going with Lucas Almeida as my underdog, I also expect him. I'm also seeing him probably getting this win via stoppage at some point. I don't know if he'll go to the distance just because he has not. He's not won. He's fought to three rounds before, but he's even won in the third round. He has a third round TKO over Michael Trezano, and Michael Trezano, he's not a bad fighter. That's actually I think a good win to have in the UFC. He's not a bad fighter, but he's definitely not the best either. But so and that being said, when you look at who Timothy Kwamba's fought, yeah, again he's not been in the UFC long enough. He only has that one fight, which came to split decision loss to Balaji, and I will say Balaji is a good fighter. Like at least for now, he hasn't really fought anyone big yet either. He's 9-1, so I won't say he's not a good fighter. But he's still but you know what I'm saying, like he's not even a ranked fighter at all. But it's at least someone with a good record that Timothy beat because all that he lost to, I should say, because everyone that he's fought before then, if you look at their records, they're just not that good. Michael Stack, who Timothy's beat, he's 7-3, but and then so not as much experience there either. But then Mateo Alejandro Vogel, he himself too. He is 9-3. He couldn't make it in the Dana White's Contender Series. Alexander Schneck, uh, he himself, he had like yeah, 5-4. There was one guy too that he fought that just I think it's Cody Hard, and he beat him in the first round as well. And uh, Cody 4-6, and he lost 5 in a row. And he's not really like not like so. These are some dudes that are on his record too that I've seen that just really are not impressive in my eyes, like at all. Like either not in the UFC or couldn't make it in the UFC, and are just getting by in the UFC for that one fight. So and again the dudes he's fought, a lot of them almost have identical like losing records to their winning records. So um, this one, I'm definitely just going with the guy that I think is the slightly more experienced fighter. So even though he is a big underdog, but I think a lot of people again are writing off that recency bias. But as I dig a little more into Timothy Kwamba's opponents that he's fought in the past, they just don't really seem like legit threats, and it almost makes it seem like his record was a little like I don't know. Maybe they kind of like buffed it up a little bit because he's 8-2 already, while Lucas Almeida's 14-3. So Almeida's already got he's already got 6 more wins than Timothy Kwamba, and he also has just one more loss. So so that being said, yeah, I'm gonna go with the guy that I think is the more experienced and better fighter, which is Lucas Almeida, and it excites me to see him as the underdog in this matchup. And how they size up and everything else, though, what I always like to compare is they have this. There's no reach advantage for either or. They both have a 71-inch reach, and but Lucas Almeida, he throws a high volume of strikes, but that's where he does absorb a lot too. But again, and not for much either because he's been finished in both of his 2 fights. So it's just based off how many fights they've had in the UFC alone. But that being said, yeah, Lucas Almeida, I'm going with the underdog, Lucas Almeida, on this one. I know you do not have a pick on this fight, Nick, but any thoughts on this fight?
Not really. I stayed away from it because I didn't like either one of these guys. They're both fighters to fade, in my opinion, and guys that I'm not too excited about. Um, I was ready to fade and hope to bet against both of them. So it's like, shoot, 2 guys I want to bet against. No, thank you. But yeah, it'll be interesting. It's a main card fight, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, without a doubt, definitely. I was yeah, these fights are interesting. It was either this for me or the Douglas Silva, DeAndrade, and Miles Johns fight. I should have done that Asu fight too. That would have been I would have bumped it would have bumped everything down one, and we literally pretty much had identical picks, but the one weight. If I would have gone that route, but I'm riding with Lucas Almeida, the underdog. He's probably gonna be my dog of the week.
Sounds good, man. So that'll wrap it up here. We had a nice long show for you guys today, and we will be back, of course, because my favorite fighter returns to the octagon next week. A week from Saturday, we're going to finally see Hamzat Chimaev return to fight Robert Whitaker. This will be in the Middle East in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. And in that case, it'll be a daytime fight for us. So enjoy the afternoon fights while we have them, because next week we're going to see some day fights, main card around 2 o'clock. But that card is so, like, I can't even emphasize it, so much better than this one. I mean, I would argue the fourth fight on this card's main event the fourth fight on this card's main card could be the main event of this Saturday's card. Like, it's not even close. So return next Monday, a week from today, and we'll be back with the heat to continue. We'll see how we succeed on this Saturday. So thanks for listening, and we'll be back.